Anesthesiologists, what are the best things people have said under the gas? 2 of my fav, both patients coming out of anesthesia. Am I in hell? I responded, no you're not, you're just in recovery. That sounds like something the devil would say. Count backwards from 100 to prove it. Or the one who stroked my unshaved arm while I was trying to keep him from pulling at his IV, and muttered you'd make such a great carpet. I love the implication that the devil can't count backwards. Might be the patient's lucid dreaming test. When I got put under for a colonoscopy I didn't really fall asleep during the countdown. I just looked at the nurse a bit confused and said I don't notice anything, and she smiled and squeezed my wrist and said just give it a moment. As soon as she said that I started fading out, and according to her the last thing I mumbled was oh that's fucked, you magic witch. This one is my favorite. When they told me to start counting, I apparently counted for 45 seconds before I went out, but I only remember the first 10 lol. I had to go under for ear surgery once. I thought it'd be funny if I asked does anyone need anything while I'm out right before I went under. I remember it kicking in way quicker than I thought it would, so I had to take my chance while I still had it. I yelled it but got a very confused look from everyone standing around me. Took a minute for me to realize I had accidentally yelled it while I was waking up from surgery. Oops. Ping. 8,000 milliseconds. The lag is real. My husband went under last year, and once he woke up, by all appearances he was as sober as a church mouse. Walking, asking serious questions of the doctor, apparently no issues at all. He remembered the procedure and described it to me in detail. I figured he just never went completely under. He was craving Chinese food, and nothing would do except for buffet. So we headed down and loaded up our first load of plates. Evidently, he actually woke up from the anesthesia at the buffet. As far as he remembers, he was put under and woke up in front of a plate of chicken teriyaki on a stick. I had a similar incident with a concussion. 14-year-old trying to impress friends at summer camp on the first day. Jumped over a picnic bench, cleared it easily. Didn't see that there was a rock the size of a 2 fists where I landed. Ended up tripping over that and slammed my head on the dirt. Got up immediately, played it off like nothing happened. Since I landed on dirt I didn't have too bad of a scrape. Ended up chatting with everyone. Jumped the picnic bench again since I was mad at what happened. Walked a girl to her cabin and told her I liked her. Walked to my cabin, grabbed my toiletries. Went to the bathroom, took a shower. This is when I woke up, had everything explained to me after. Also, showered with my shirt and socks on. Forgot those. Same. Fell from a tree when I was 10. Got up and went on with my shenanigans for hours, gathering nuts and stuff. Eventually woke up in front of the TV, confused as fuck, wondering why there's nuts in my pocket. I slowly started remembering everything. My friend also told me I talked to a girl I liked. We weren't friends or anything, so I wouldn't normally do that. But that one I didn't remember, so I think he was just messing with me. My dad had a double knee replacement years ago, and for a week in the hospital held conversations, entertained visitors, normal as can be, except he doesn't remember any of it. Like, at all. Between the anesthesia and painkillers, he was lit the whole time. Kind of a reverse story. Going under to get my appendix removed, they begin doing the countdown as they inject a hefty dose of propofol and fentanyl to put me out. I count down to 1 and then ask, now what? The surgeon looks at me and says you're still awake. Man, you are fat, you know that. I said you're just saying that because you think I won't remember. He said, exactly. That's the last thing I remember. That must have been awkward when you woke up. I told him when I saw him a day later. He kinda chuckled and said he'd better watch what he says from now on. Considering the level of education required to be an anesthesiologist, it makes sense that he wasn't overly concerned about his job security. My wife was getting a spinal tap, and while everything was being prepared, our anesthesiologist got a call for what must have been an optional or on-call gig. I can't come in, I've been out and I'm drinking copious amounts of alcohol. Bye, and hangs up. Probably a doc not actually on call, but was called because they didn't have anyone available. It happens. LOL. I remember I had to call in 3 of our 4 surgical teams, only 1 on call per day. 2 was a small hospital. in and had another emergency surgery to call in for, and 2 of the 5 people I had left to call were drunk. It was like 9 PM on a Saturday, of course they were. Appendectomy. Countdown from 10. Hit 0. Still just feeling pain from the appendix. Doctor goes, well, you seem to have a high drug tolerance. Sucks for you if you're a recreational user. LOL, that's the last thing I remember him saying to me. Oh, I was 15 at the time. Guessing much like your doc, he didn't expect me to remember that moment. I'm starting to think this is common practice. Say highly offensive shit before they go out. Robin Williams joked that propofol was milk of amnesia. Didn't he also say something like taking propofol to sleep is like getting chemo for a haircut? Yet taking chemo because you're tired of cutting your hair. Nurse anesthetist here. When I was in school I was getting ready to get a lady off to sleep and going through my regular spiel. I had the mask on her face and I said nice big breaths as I pushed propofol. Right before she went out she said thanks, I just had them done. I looked at my preceptor, we looked at the circulator, and we all burst out laughing. I now say slow deep breaths instead. I love telling that story. That lady made all our days. Last year they were knocking me out for a colonoscopy. It was the 3rd time I had been put under in a year. As such I had a curiosity. I had heard that when they knock you out you are still awake for a while. You just don't remember. So in the spirit of science I proposed a test with the anesthesiologist. When she started the medicine I would begin counting backward. When I would wake up we would compare what I remember to what she observed. Plunger down 99, 98, 97. I remember nothing more. Minutes later I awoke. The anesthesiologist dismissed me and came over quickly. What did you remember, she asked. 97. She began laughing. You got down to 7. I was having a broken wrist set and the doctor told me to count from 100. He told me afterward that I got to 50, stopped for about 5 minutes, started back up and finished. My dad works with that stuff. Funniest thing he's heard is, hey Mr. Doctor, my ass itches and I'm too high to scratch. Edit. No, he didn't help. The dude passed out right after. My wife is an anesthesiologist and her best line from a patient is, this is better than meth. Reminds me of when I tried liquor for the first time with my parents as a teenager and I accidentally told them that I liked vodka better. When I was getting put out, I heard this cheesy jazz music in the operating room. I said, of course doctor. R listens to this garbage, doctor. R immediately appeared next to me looking none too thrilled. Then I went under. When I was 9 and having jaw surgery, the surgeon was putting me under and said say bye to your mommy, and apparently 9-year-old me thought that meant they were going to kill me. My mother says I gave her a look of absolute terror and then passed out. I had a patient start to joke before surgery and finish it when they woke up without prompting. I can just imagine it going like, what do you call a guy W, a rubber toe? Hours later, comma Roberto. What's the most important part of any good joke? Timing. In high school I had a reconstructive surgery on my knee as I tore my ACL and meniscus in a sports injury. After the surgery I woke up in post-op, which was a fairly large room with probably 6 to 7 other patients in beds waiting to become conscious again. I was lying there all groggy and confused when 2 nurses walked over pushing one of those carts with a computer on it. They stood over me and were typing into the computer when one nurse said to the other in a sort of frantic whisper, we've got to plug this thing in or this one is going to die. Naturally, semi-conscious me thought that the thing was me and I started to incoherently yell for the nurses to unplug whatever they needed to in order to find an outlet to keep me alive. Turns out it was the battery on the laptop that was going to die. Apparently the death rate for an ACL repair is pretty low. Not an anesthesiologist, but when I went in for my gallbladder surgery the nurse was an old co-worker and I blurted out on the table, I knew you'd see me naked before I was out. LOL, witty. Kinda smooth one line and then just an unconscious limp body on the table. Cutting from one to the other is pretty freaking funny. I broke my hand tumbling once and had to get surgery. He goes to put the mask on my face and says this is oxygen. I cough as the mask goes on. He pulls the mask away and I said I trusted you. You lying fuck. That's the last thing I remember. Edit. I did have an IV. But I'm almost positive the mask is what knocked me out. I remember everything up to the mask though. I remember it got really cold further into the hospital and the warm blankets they gave me. Surgeon, not anesthesiologists, had a super sweet 30yo. Short woman go for a laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Little overweight, smoked cigarettes, otherwise uncomplicated history. It's like 8 p.m. On the table, anesthesiologist gave her propofol and she just didn't fall asleep, kept looking around. Gave some more, eventually closed her eyes and as anesthesia was intubating, said something like, "Yeah, that was a lot, I'm a vet now, I've never put a horse to sleep before." Everyone chuckled. When she woke up at the end, was moving around a lot, no big deal. Started rolling around and reaching and grabbing at her lines. Nasal, urinary catheter, the nurse, face mask, me, the poor med student who didn't even want to do surgery. I lean over to keep her in place and she starts trying to get out of bed. She was stronger than she looked. Again, little annoying but whatever, part of the process. 9:30 p.m. Now in recovery and I sign out the patients to the nursing recovery team. Patient is calm and fine. I go to computer stuff and get back to other patients. I get a call from recovery nurse. 10 p.m. Nurse yelling for help. Won't tell me what's wrong. Just that I need to be bedside immediately. I sprint to recovery thinking the patient is bleeding, heart stopped, blood pressure tanking, etc. Number. Patient standing on the bed stretcher screaming tongues, thrashing her arms around like a blow-up Carlot noodle man. Anesthesiologist is trying to grab her swinging IV line. I'm trying to talk her down but she's gone full Godzilla versus tiny townspeople. I grab her legs and lower her down. Anesthesia gives her some IV calm the fuck downable. She gets starry-eyed and we breath, life is good again. 10:30 p.m. I'm behind on work, trying to catch up. Getting hit with ED consults. IQ calling for help on a bleeding patient. Haven't had dinner. My senior and me also I have no help. Phone rings. Nurse says, the lab collie patient is asking if she can go outside to smoke a cigarette. 1:45 a.m. Me. Hell no. Is she even out of bed yet? Nurse. I just told her no. It's not safe. She told me to go fuck my goldfish. Can we give her some Nicorette gum or something? Me wow. Yeah, I'll order it. Only time I've ever ordered stat then called the pharmacy for hand delivery of frickin' gum. Nicorette. She was a complete sweetheart on the morning rounds. I don't know which was real. Mandatory edit. Glad this made so many people chuckle. Thanks for the gold and silver. Gonna see if I can use that to buy a better autofill for my phone. Edit for words. I have a few. My first is a 17-year-old that just got her appendix out. She seemed really stoic and introverted when I first interviewed her, but when I was dropping her in the recovery room she went into total bro mode. She keeps saying everything was fucking lit. She keeps saying let's party bro and responded to every question with a fuck yeah dude. My favorite though was a surgery on a lady in her 80s. She volunteered at the hospital and was a widow. In the recovery room I started hooking up her ECG. This involved attaching some cables to stickers on her up chest. When I reached for them she tried to just pull her gown down and show me her breasts. I said no, you don't need to do that. She just said this is so exciting, it's been a while since I've been with a man. The nurse just started laughing and I got a little red. She then said it's sure getting hot in here. Sorry, it's been a while. I had to leave after that, I was way too uncomfortable. I'm a CNA. Female, in my 50s. I was assisting a lady in her 90s who needed 2 people to help her up. My co-worker was a very young and easily embarrassed dude. In reaching for the gate belt, I pinched this poor woman's nipple, and she yelped. I apologized profusely. That's okay, it's not like they haven't been pinched before, she replied happily, and my co-worker almost fainted in horror. I had my wisdom teeth out and supposedly still bleeding a good amount on the way to CVS to pick up the meds. My mom was driving and I was just staring out the window collecting blood in my mouth. Eventually it reached a point it was too much at a red light. Rolled down the window and just let it all flow out of my mouth. I look up and this lady is looking at me with just pure horror on her face. I proceeded while still in some sort of haze from the drugs to give her what I can imagine the bloodiest smile anyone has ever seen. She wasn't originally turning right but proceeded to make an immediate turn. I am so glad I can remember this while still being high. Edit. Some follow up. Once I got the Vicodin I had like a 20 minutes convo about absolutely nothing that I had zero remembrance of. To the people afraid of having their wisdom teeth pulled, it's not bad. I had more pain from being hungry than the procedure itself. Mine were impacted and never britches, so it was pretty much the worst case scenario. Had it done Thursday morning. Went to work Friday night on lifting restrictions. Went to a party Saturday night when the bleeding had stopped, but I drank a bit too much. Had been off the Vicodin for 36 hours. And had thinned my blood out and started bleeding at the party. Hahaha. That reminds me of when my BF got his wisdom teeth out. He took a long time to come back around. We went to the pharmacy to pick up his meds, and he demanded he be allowed to come inside instead of wait in the car. I reluctantly obliged because I was nervous about what he'd do if I left him alone. And every stranger we came into contact with he gave the bloodiest smile, literal blood dripping out onto his shirt, saying I just got my wisdom teeth out. Most customers were not amused. Patient. When I was coming up from shoulder surgery on a pretty substantial dose of fentanyl, my wife told me that. I looked at the head nurse and said, "Your boobs are spectacular. I want to see them." I have no memory of it, but apparently the wife was mortified, and the nurse thought it was hysterical. She also said it wasn't particularly unusual to get comments of that sort. When I was put under for Achilles tendon surgery when I was 16, I asked the anesthesiologist how long he had to go to med school, and he responded with all day. Not anesthesia. The patient was heavily sedated in ICU. Nurse gave an enema. Half-conscious response. "Honey, you know I don't like it that way." I have a similar story. Colonoscopy. Very prim and proper lady under sedation. As the scope was introduced, she exclaimed, "Oh, darling, you said you wouldn't do that anymore." Happened today. Patient has a broken ankle fixed and was coming out of anesthesia when he was being wheeled out. The anesthesiologist accidentally hit the door frame on the way out. Patient: "Did you just do surgery on my leg?" Anesthesiologist: "Yes, you had surgery and are waking up from it." Patient: "Then why are you running into things?" My fiancé and I had broken up within the last week and was still dealing with that horribly. I was on pain meds for my shoulder and was scheduled for surgery in the current week. The day of the surgery, I was to get a nerve block. The anesthesiologist was the one performing the nerve block. He and I were chit-chatting, and he was just a really comforting person. He was telling me about everything that was going to go on during the surgery. Then we were just chit-chatting about life when the topic of the breakup came up. He was even comforting with that. So after that, I was wheeled into surgery. He was there to put me under, which for some reason put me at great ease. As I was going under, I guess I started talking through the mask and he lifted the mask to hear what I was trying to say. When I boldly stated I still love your fiancé's name while holding direct eye contact with him. I didn't know I did it. Not until he visited me in recovery. He said thanks for the nickname, then told me what I said. I guess the entire surgical staff referred to him by my fiancé's name for the duration of the surgery. So not only did I call this poor guy a woman's name that stuck with him for the duration for the surgery, I stated how much I loved him to boot. When I went back for the second surgery, guess who my anesthesiologist was? 2 men at a count during my 15 years of practice. That's some good shit. Falling asleep mid-sentence. "I want to have your babies." A 55-year-old woman to my medical student. "You're really going to shove that whole thing up my ass?" To the endoscopist right before a colonoscopy. Big or small, I love them all. 90-year-old woman talking to nurses about men. "Do I need to take my underwear off?" Teenager about to go into labor. "I'm not sure how that happened." Another pregnant teenager. "I don't want you to be too surprised by my tattoo." Conservative looking Asian man with a Pinocchio tattoo around his penis, with his penis as the nose. Where did all the American doctors go? Guy covered with swastikas to a room filled with Asian doctors and nurses. Edits. First pregnant teenager was about to get an epidural. She hadn't gotten any drugs yet. Second pregnant teenager was just shocked that she was pregnant, as were her parents. She was in the surgery center for some elective procedure. We do pregnancy tests on pretty much all females. The guy with that tattoo was actually a nurse. I asked his wife about it and she said that he had been asking about it for years and finally had it done in the Philippines. I thought the work was actually pretty good. I told the swastika guy, actually I am American. I was born here as was my mother and grandfather. In fact we have been in this country 120 years. If you're looking for a white doctor, I'm afraid I can't help you. I was thinking that maybe you probably shouldn't be insulting the guy that is in charge of bringing you to the verge of death and back. The surgery went uneventfully if anybody is curious. It as a 13-year-old tonsillectomy patient, the one Oz cocktail I drank prior to anesthesiology didn't quite knock me out. A few surgical residents wheeled me into the theater before the surgeon anesthesiologist arrived. One said to the other, his eyes just opened, "What do we do?" Another chimed in, "Talk to him." The third, not sure what to say, opened the kit and said, "Here's the blade we'll be making the incision with." I woke up halfway through mine. I was about 15 I think, and the doctor just looked at me and said, "Oh well, you shouldn't be awake," and I gargled something. Not an anesthesiologist, but when I severely dislocated and broke my knee I apparently gave one of the doctors that was just finishing resetting my leg a huge slap on the back and yelled, "It's fixed. You guys are the best doctors I've ever seen." Giving a 5-star review. Wife said the nurses were cracking up. I'm a pretty big guy and the doctor I gave the friendly pat on the back was a relatively small dude. My wife couldn't take me for my first colonoscopy due to work so my mother did, and apparently coming out of anesthesia, when they were removing my IV, I told the nurse, "Oh, that's neat. I've taken a lot of those out, but I've never had it done to me, and my patients are always dead." Apparently she looked very concerned by this information and my mother had to explain that I've been a licensed funeral director for many years and hospitals and other facilities often do not remove tubing. Apparently I then followed that up by telling the young nurse she had a nice butt, but not as nice as my wife's. My mother felt free to share that with everyone. So yeah, I creeped out a nurse by talking about my occupation, and then even more by commenting on her butt in a backhanded compliment. Not an anesthesiologist, but when my stepdad was going under for a surgery, he was almost out but at a sweet point that the doctor told my mom she could ask him anything and he wouldn't be able to help but answer truthfully. She asked, "Do you love me?" My stepdad replied, "You need to go on and get your little Yoda shoes." I'm pretty sure Yoda doesn't even wear shoes. Not an anesthesiologist but was a tech. Had a patient wake up violently. When he came to he said, "Sorry, I thought I was a shark." When I was about to go out for surgery, they were strapping me down and told me it was so that I don't fall off the table. My last words were, "It's okay. 5-second rule." My anesthesiologist tried to calm me down with a joke when I was a little kid being put under. My mom later told me about how I apparently commented on the joke being not at all funny and how I hoped he was more talented as a doctor. I was coming out of general anesthesia after a surgery to repair a broken leg. I woke up in my room with about a dozen very caring, kind friends and relatives who had all come to see that I was okay. I looked around, saw everyone giving shits about me, said, "Fuck this," loudly and very clearly, and went right back to sleep. I had to take my mom to the hospital and while I was speaking to the doctor about her medical history, my mom was real insistent about them knowing her tennis elbow. "Doctor, so is she on any medication?" Mom, tennis elbow. Me, no, she's. Mom, tennis elbow. Me, she has tennis elbow. Doctor, I can tell. Mom, tennis elbow. My brother went under and on his way out he said, "Holy fuck, you are beautiful," and I'm in love to the nurse anesthetist. During my wisdom teeth surgery they were playing music, and Billie Jean comes on. I said glad Michael Jackson could join us and that was the last thing I remember. Before I went in for hernia surgery a medical student came in and asked if I had any questions. I replied yes, "Why would you have me shave my entire body, eyebrows and all for a hernia repair?" She looked terrified and asked who specifically told me to do this. "I have alopecia universalis. No hair anywhere. Gotta have some fun with it." No anesthesia at this point. Patient, not a doctor, but in junior high I came out of anesthesia lying on top of a nurse. I was totally confused. I introduced myself and asked if she knew why I was on top of her. She She said I had tried to get up to go to the bathroom. She told me no and then tried to stop me. She said I did some kind of wrestling takedown and then pinned her. As I became lucid, I couldn't apologize enough. She said she was used to dealing with younger patients and it was okay. Hearing this story was the only time my coach said he was proud of me. Not an anesthesiologist, but I knew a guy who had surgery and afterwards wanted to go home. He wasn't recovered enough to, and the nurse wasn't gonna let him get up yet. He turned to the nurse and said, "You may not realize this, but I'm a ninja and we heal 3 times faster than normal people." At that the nurse stopped trying to keep him in bed. He stood and immediately ate the floor. Anesthesiologist here. I was once transporting a patient to the ICU after surgery, in which he got some ketamine, and he was rocking out the entire way there with his air guitar. Also, just a patient and also redhead, so it's harder to put or keep us under. During wisdom teeth operation my phone rang in my pocket. I answered it with a mouthful of gauze and just said womba and that was that. I had a simple procedure done when I was younger, but it was my second time being under any kind of strong knockout gas. Before I went under I looked at the anesthesiologist, who was a pretty cute grey-haired man, and said, "God, you're attractive." But I'm sure you hear that every day, and passed out. When I came to I started hitting on all of the nurses. Male and female. One of the nurses had an adorable face and I just grinned and said, "Man, you're so pretty. You're just beautiful. Are you single?" I said that in front of my mom at age 19. She won't ever let me live it down. Also the nurse was married and she let me down gently. Not gas, but right after giving my dazzlam I had a patient say, "Wow, this feels like the 70s."